Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278. The St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, in partnership with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network, presents a podcast for families in crisis.
Hi, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. My name is DeSantis. I'm the director, joined by the president of the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, Mickey Kelly, for our Beatitudes series. This is our Families in Crisis podcast series on our YouTube channel, which is Philly Nonnatus. Mickey, welcome again to our podcast.
Hello again, Ann. We're back at it once more.
We're back at it once more. And the first one that we did was that very first Beatitude. And on this one, we're going to talk about the second one, which is, Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And of course, those Beatitudes were Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And they're really lessons for all of us for living, for growing closer to Him and to doing His will. And to be honest with you, in finding happiness in our lives. I didn't know, Mickey, we'll start out with you. I didn't know if you had anything to say or any comments on Blessed are they who mourn.
One of the first things I really think about is, like, when we think of this beatitude, is that we tend to think it just pertains to those who probably mourn the loss of a loved one. But I think it goes a little more deeper than that. And every time I think of this beatitude a little more, I think of those that maybe go through some mental suffering, so to speak. So, and of course, there's a growing number of people in the Catholic Church that wants to try to put the spotlight on mental health, which I think is very welcome news. Let's face it, because if we look at what has happened to our culture, the last half century or more, you see a lot of people are really suffering inside. There are wounds that we don't see outside, they're battling something internally. And thank God for ministries like us, where we can reach out to those who experience, the crisis brought about, from the divorce aspect whatsoever, or even like times where their families are in crisis. And honestly, mourning does go deeper than, losing someone like a friend or a family member that is close to you. There's something more to it. And I honestly think that, with the rise in depression and those with other health ailments, that this is really their beatitude right here, because they know that they will be comforted by good friends who probably had the same struggle as them, and in time is they're going to strive to be the best version themselves.
Yeah, good points, because first of all, you mentioned our foundation, and that's part of what we do. And I just think that's so true. And I thank you for bringing it up, because our whole charism is that pastoral accompaniment. And if this is your first time listening to one of our podcasts, just know that, that's the most important thing that we do as a foundation, is make that outreach to you who are suffering in some way, which can bring about sadness and depression. And so I do want to just make a shout out, which I'm sure I'll mention it one more time, is that we offer the free pastoral consultation with a Mercedarian friar, All you need to do is simply go to our website, and there's a priestly consult drop down there under our services. Just want to make sure I mention that, because if you are a person right now listening to this podcast and thinking, I am a person who's mourning right now, I'm going through a lot of stuff. We're there for you, and that way that we do that is offering our free services. So thank you again, Mickey. I thought I would read also from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's a great place for us to go to really learn exactly what the Catholic Church teaches. And if you go to Part 3, Life in Christ, Section 1, Man's Vocation, Life in the Spirit, and Chapter 1 is the dignity of the human person, our vocation to beatitude. And I'll read what it says in number 1716. It says the Beatitudes are at the heart of Jesus's preaching. They take up the promises made to the chosen people since Abraham. The Beatitudes fulfill the promises by ordering them no longer merely to the possession of a territory, but to the kingdom of heaven. Now let me read all of them just to give a little bit of a review. So last month we did the blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's the first one. And this evening is blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Third one is blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Next is blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad. Now let me just read a little bit more about the Beatitudes. In the Catechism, it says number 1717, that the Beatitudes depict the countenance of Jesus Christ and portray his charity. They express the vocation of the faithful associated with the glory of his passion and resurrection. They shed light on the actions and attitudes characteristic of the Christian life. They are the paradoxical promises that sustain hope in the midst of tribulations. They proclaim the blessings and rewards already secured, however dimly, for Christ's disciples. They have begun in the lives of the Virgin Mary and all the saints. Now, we're taping this in December of 2021, and I'm sure that somebody's listening to this way beyond that, because our podcasts are always on demand. You can listen to them way later on. But we're in the Advent season right now, and they're mentioning the Blessed Mother. We just celebrated the other day, when we're taping this, the Immaculate Conception. Of course, that is the fact that Mary was conceived without sin. But on top of that, later on, Mary gave her yes, didn't she? She gave her yes to God. And we give our yeses, don't we? We do give our yeses every single day of our lives. And I think that when we give our lives to Christ, we're faced with these Beatitudes, and we're faced with mourning, because let's face it, in our world, there's suffering, isn't there? And when we're not afraid to suffer with those who are depressed, lonely, suffering, sad, condemned, whatever it is, we're going to feel some kind of sadness. But what the Lord is promising us in this beatitude is that we shall be comforted. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one, Aunt, because like I said, like I've made the point in my opening statement about this podcast is, if we look at some of the saints in the church, you look at Saint Philomena, Saint Dymphna, you look at Saint Therese, Saint Teresa of Calcutta. Every single one of them, they suffered mentally. Even Saint John Paul the Great, he went through some mental trials when he lost very close family members and even friends. And but in the end, each and every one of them offered it to God. And, also like at the time of this taping, we were approaching the third Sunday of Advent. And the theme of that week is joy. They chose joy over sadness. And every Catholic that does choose joy, they engulf the world around them with the flame of love.
Yeah, I mean, think about that, the flame of love, because love isn't afraid to confront suffering, is it? It is, isn't it? It's not. It is not afraid to go over to someone who's depressed, rejected, marginalized, lonely, on the fringes. And when we're Christians, when we are living as disciples of Christ, we're going to be called to reach out to the lonely. We're going to be called to reach out to those who feel not part of the rest of society for whatever reason. And so I think that the blessed are those who mourn are for those people who have made the decision that they do want to follow Christ. And let's face it, that's not always the easiest thing to do, is to decide I'm going to be a follower of Jesus Christ, who suffered and died for the sake of others to bring freedom to the entire world, freedom from sin. And so when we do that, we're also going to face that human suffering, I believe. And there's a little bit more if we take a look in the catechism. But before we do that, Mickey, I didn't know if you had anything else to say on what I just spoke of regarding the suffering.
When we look, I would also say too, like the mental suffering, but there have been people that physically suffer for most of their lives. Like one story I remember hearing about is there was this police officer in New York that he was actually shot. He's actually shot during a line of duty to the point where he was paralyzed from the neck down. And he actually chose to forgive the person that shot him. And the two of them wound up doing speaking tours together about the theme of forgiveness and mercy. And he was like, well, of course, he was still paralyzed and everything, and he passed away back in like 2017. And then we also look at some of the people that maybe lose a limb, or if they had a life-changing experience, that probably have them lose the ability to walk or do this and that. And maybe they get a little upset because they're used to be so active doing this, and now they're like, slowing down. But let's face it, I mean, the fact that most of them just still keep going and going, it really says a lot.
Yeah, there's a perseverance that comes with that. And I really believe that perseverance is through the Holy Spirit, because when you see some of the physical and even mental, psychological suffering that some people have been through, it's only really through God that they're able to continue. And so thanks for bringing that one up. Now, I want to mention also in the catechism, I said before you were ready to speak the last time around, is that desire for happiness is in the catechism, 1718. The Beatitudes respond to the natural desire for happiness. The desire is of divine origin. God has placed it in the human heart in order to draw man to the one who alone can fulfill it. We all want to live happily in the new human race. There's no one who does not ascend to this proposition even before it is fully articulated. How is it then that I seek you, Lord? Since in seeking you, my God, I seek a happy life, let me seek you so that my soul may live, for my body draws life from my soul, and my soul draws life from you. God alone satisfies. I mean, I think it's good for us to take a look at what the Catechism says about the Beatitudes, because what they come down to is happiness, right? It's that desire to feel happy. But you brought up the term joy, and I think that that's much more important than fleeting happiness that we can get in this life, because what the Beatitudes can give us, and even when you look at that second one, the blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. What the way that I would interpret that, as I said before, is that willingness to be a disciple of Christ, even to a point where you're not afraid to confront human suffering and comfort others, right? That's a job of all of us. It's the job of all of us to comfort those who are suffering. It's those who are feeling alienated or marginalized. And that's certainly what we try to do with the foundation. But if you've suffered, you know, aside from your own ministry or aside from your own living out your baptismal call, if you're suffering because of some event that happened to you, or the death of a spouse or a loved one, or a parent, a child, a job loss, I mean, there's all kinds of things that bring about that mourning. And we do want to address all of those. But I just certainly want to say to all of you listening that God is with you, and that better times are ahead. Now, as Catholics, we know we don't have a prosperity gospel, do we? We don't have a gospel that says that, you know, we'll always have enough money in the bank, or that life will be perfect, or that we'll never be hurt again, because sin exists. And, you know, until the second coming of the Lord, we are always going to see and experience the sin of both ourselves and other people. So I think it's my understanding that what causes that sorrow that we have, the sadness, is the fact that there is still sin in the world and that we still are confronting it every day. So, Mickey, I didn't know if you had any words of wisdom on that part.
Well, and I think you really touched on something right there. I feel like a lot of suffering really has to do to the fact that people are confronted with sin every day, whether it's, you know, sins against the flesh, or even the sins that like habitual sins, you know, this and that. And of course, we shouldn't really be discouraged at all. Rather, we should just continue to do what our goal in life is, and that is to preach the gospel. And let's face it, we can really, not everyone can preach it through words. Most of us can preach it through actions too, or by our example. I mean, how many times have we saw saints that, I mean, we just got through the year of Saint Joseph, and you know, there are no quotes from Saint Joseph at all in the Gospels, whether it's Matthew or Luke. Rather, there were some visionaries like Blessed Anne Emmerich, I believe. Yeah, she got visions of Saint Joseph, and there were other I would call them disciples of Saint Joseph, that not only had devotion to the Blessed Mother, but they also in turn developed a devotion to Saint Joseph. And there's that, as a matter of fact, I just recently consecrated myself once again to Saint Joseph through the 33 days like format that Father Don Calloway wrote. That's kind of similar to the one like from Saint Louis de Montfort for like the consecration of Mary. So he did one for Saint Joseph, and there's no question, Father Calloway, he was overjoyed with the fact that Pope Francis dedicated a year to Saint Joseph. And that actually came a century and a half after Pope Pius the 9th, I think it is, or maybe 10th, but we'll be fact checked by our next episode anyway. So, but there was a time that there were some encyclicals that were coming out that to encourage a deeper devotion to Saint Joseph. Not only the fact too, there were things that were coming into the scene, such as communism, socialism, and these things that were going to have people, not understand, actually not be Saint Joseph in the workforce and everything. And of course, in the Catholic Church, they have drawn the line since the dawn, I should rather say the epiphany of I'm not sorry, the genesis of the Catholic Church. I mean, let's face it. Let's face it. You have high unemployment rates. You have inflation. You have this and that. And you also have a rise of sin in the world, whether it's against the flesh or habitual sins, which is, we're swearing, we're taking the Lord's name in vain. And there are times that most of the sins that are coming now, like, they're really going to be sins against the virtues. Even a wise person from the Novena clique that I know in my parish, that's something that Father Calloway adopted. So that's something for you. That's a person you can interview in the near future. But anyway.
Yes.
But anyway, one of the things that we can really learn is that with all these sins that we are confronted every day. I mean, and how many times have we been confronted when we stand outside of Planned Parenthood together? And how often we have people that would jeer us, whether it would be just a foot away while they're walking to go to work or go home or whatever they're doing. Or times we probably get like honking horns, and we can do, well, I don't think we ever took a course in Morse code or anything, but I'm sure they probably were, cheering on Planned Parenthood while jeering at us, so to speak. And of course, we are faced with the reality that we're not really fighting flesh and blood in this spiritual battle, but we're really fighting Satan and his principalities that are running amok in this society. And we have two choices. We could just sit and watch, like the second string team during a football game, or we can just step into the breach and fight it.
There's something about being brave. And I know for me, what I've witnessed with you, on a personal note, of course, is what you just mentioned about going to facilities and praying there. It takes some bravery. So I just want to just thank you for your commitment there, because that's a way that we can live out those Beatitudes, because we're protecting human life. Now, on the topic of this blessed are they who mourn, I found an article that I thought we could just kind of unpack a little bit. It's called Blessed Are They Who Mourn, and it came out from the Diocese of Little Rock. So I just found this article, and in the article, it says that on the topic of people who are sad and mourning, whether it be from the death of a loved one or something else, it gave some words of wisdom on that. It says that mourning as a form of prayer is more than grief experienced over loss. Mourning is the sense in the offering of our experience of loss to God, even when there is anger toward God, because we sense somehow that God was involved in taking away our loved one. Let's talk about that, because we're on this podcast, which is for families in crisis. Maybe you have a spouse that left you, or you are divorced or separated. Maybe you lost your job this year. Maybe one of your parents died or has cancer or some other illness. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's loss of friends, or not feeling very welcome in your church community, work, or neighborhood. So I thought we could talk about these things, because people who are really suffering because of some kind of a loss, especially right now, we're taping this for the Christmas season. It's going to air that last Thursday of this month in December of 2021, although people can listen to it whenever they want to later on. I didn't know, Mickey, if you had any comments on that, because it's certainly a time, I think, that people reflect on the losses that they've had. And I just want to say to those people, don't give up, because God is with you no matter what.
Yes, and I think now we're staying on topic here, of course. What's the meaning of the Beatitude of Mourning? Well, one of the things that I have seen, and there has been some funerals that I have attended over the years. One of the funerals that kind of stood out to me was about a year ago as we were coming out of the communist lockdown, I like to call it. I know, we were in the midst of a pandemic and everything, but in reality, I think it was a lot like a communist takeover. But it's one thing that I was noticing and one of the things that I really enjoy of some of the funerals that I have attended is listening to the eulogies. And most of the time, these eulogies, of course, the eulogies would share about the life of the deceased. And some of the eulogies that some of the things I really got out of the eulogies is that the person that would deliver it, they would share something that really speaks of the character of the deceased. The one in particular was given by his brother-in-law, and he would share some of the memories he had with him around Christmas time, of course, and how they would decorate the tree, and they would have, a couple of beers, reminisce about the good times and everything. And in fact, he actually got to the point where he actually nearly broke down because they were very close with each other. And considering the fact, too, that he was married to his sister for a long time, and they had 3 kids together. One actually died, was predeceased. He had a son. He passed away. I forget what happened, but and he also served our country proudly during the Vietnam War, but he never really talked about it. And that's common for a lot of Vietnam veterans. But anyway, some of the things and this would be a challenge too, to anyone that's listening to this podcast. I mean, someone could be listening to this after losing a very close loved one, whether it's a parent, uncle, aunt, in-law, cousin, whoever. Something I would challenge you to do is, if you were to give a presentation on the life of that close loved one that passed away, how do you want everyone attending the wake or funeral to remember that person? What are some of the characteristics that stood out about that person? And how can we apply it in everyday life? And through that, they will be comforted from that period of bereavement.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think people need to hear that message, Mickey. So thank you, because, when the holiday comes, by that I mean Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, whatever it is, you can't help but think about the people that have gone before us. On a personal note, not to go into too much detail, but I will say that for my own family this past year, my husband lost both of his parents. So, of course, he's been praying every night for the repose of the soul of his parents who died 3 weeks from one another. And so when you go through something like that or some other loss, you can certainly understand that beatitude of blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And that meditation that I was just reading from the article from the Blessed Are Those Who Mourn from the Diocese of Little Rock, Arkansas. I'll just read it again because I think what it offered is something very important. It says that mourning as a form of prayer is more than the grief experienced over a loss. So I guess what I want to mention to you who are listening is that if you have gone through some kind of a loss, whether it is, as Mickey said, the loss of a parent, an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, a child, sometimes a good friend, a neighbor, a brother, a sister, I mean, the list goes on. Just know that mourning that you have is a sign of love, and that your tears, your depression, the feelings of loneliness, of sadness, are a form of a prayer to the Lord. So don't give up. the Lord is with you. And I just want to say that God hasn't given up on you. And this same article says that whether or not there's even a trace of anger in our mourning, when mourning is offered as a prayer, it is a prayer that will be answered by God. And then a little bit more, it says there's something more, however, and that is also contained in this beatitude. It tells us that we should mourn. At the time Jesus delivered the Beatitudes, his disciples were not mourning, and for good reason. But the time would come when they would mourn, and also for good reason. Now, there's a little bit more there too, but I'll just stop there and see if you, Mickey, had any words on that.
Sure, and first off, I do want to commend you for sharing something personal that has happened to you this year, and I'm sure that it has been a tough time for your in-laws, generally
Yes.
speaking. And let's face it, I can actually relate to you to a certain degree, because from the time I was in middle school, I was losing a relative once a year. Well, from 2001 to, let's say, about 2004. And I just remember, like, there are times like I was sitting at the dinner table on Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving, whatever the case is, and I was just like noticing that there was an empty seat somewhere, that it just actually made my heart sink. Recently, I was actually out with some friends after we were attending mass for Holy Day of Obligation, and well, for the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, but some people are going to be seeing this a little later, but that's okay. And we were actually gathered. We went to a brewing a restaurant that was just around the corner from the Basilica, and I was a little zoned out, so to speak. And someone kind of snapped me back to reality, and I did my best to kind of hinder it, but she sensed that there was like something wrong, so I had to open up, and I was like saying, yeah, it's like this time of the year. Because I honestly, and like for 20 years, like this time of year does get to me, because my grandparents are no longer with me, and there was just less and less people coming over my house on Christmas Eve, as well as Christmas night too, for the festivities. Even though there were times like, well, of course, we invited my cousins to come over in recent years, and they did fill the void a little bit, but the glue of the family, they have gone to their eternal reward and, be with Jesus, of course. But I think one of the things that I've really learned is that they are with Jesus, and they're cheering you on from heaven, to fulfill God's will in life. And they don't want you to mourn, like, forever. Let's face it. But what they do want you to do is to get on with your life. And some days it would be hard, some days it would be easy. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, and I have this quote actually glued to on my my MacBook here. She said that suffering is a sign that you have come so close to him that he can kiss you. And let's face it, many people do suffer a lot, whether physical or mentally, but God's love engulfs them and surrounds them. No matter what trials they endure, no matter what tribulations are set about, come before them, God is with them. And also too, every time I'm like tempted to, to cry or whatever, over the fact that they're not there, I just have to, take a step back and just, pray for them, or even offer a mass for your loved one. And I have done this for quite some time at my parish. I've had a mass said, usually on either their birthday or the anniversary of when they passed from their earthly life. So one of the things like I would say is share some good memories you have of that person that's no longer with you. And just remember that they are with you. You just don't see them.
Yes, that's right. They are with you, you just don't see them. And what you said about the perseverance of life, because when we think about generation after generation of good lives that were lived and passed on, the baton was passed on to people like you, Mickey, to live a good life, and you are. And for those who are listening, same thing. So although you might feel mourning, God is by your side. I want to read a little bit more, if I could, from the Blessed Are Those Who Mourn. It says, and so it is, we continue to live our lives in Christ as those who both mourn and rejoice, with good reason for both. Our mourning, however, if it is both prayerful and biblically rooted, will not just be mourning for our personal losses. We are called to mourn together as Christians. We are called to do this communally and liturgically in penitential rites during Lent. We continue to grieve for our participation in human sinfulness, the sinfulness that sent Jesus to suffer and die on the cross. That's a good point. You know, we have losses that we've suffered, whether it be a loss of a loved one, a divorce, a separation, the ending of a friendship, or something else, or a job loss. And then we have those losses that are caused by human sin, not always by ourselves, but just from either other people's sin or even just from the world itself, because the world has sin in it. And sometimes it is our own personal sin too. Now, we're coming closely to a close in about 5 minutes for the podcast. Before we end, Mickey, I didn't know if you had any kind of, final words that you wanted to say on Blessed Are They Who Mourn.
And I think we covered everything, but if there's one thing I do want to offer is that it's okay to mourn, but just always remember that, and honestly, it's better to mourn than to just bottle it up. Because if you do bottle it up, it's going to take over you. And I've had my share of doing that. But some of the things I would say you do is put everything, your mourning, your suffering, at the foot of the cross. Because let's face it, when Jesus hung on that cross on Good Friday, he did it for a reason. And it wasn't just the fall of humanity with all the sins of the flesh and everyone who was going to commit mortal sin time and time again, whether they were Catholic and name only politicians or people that fell away from the church because there are too many rules, or the Catholic Church is not with the times or whatever. He died for you.
Yes.
And he even died for those that was going to go through many of life's tribulations, good or bad. So never forget that Jesus is with you always. And even he said in the Gospel of John, in the world there will be many troubles and tribulations, but he overcame them. So if you can overcome your sufferings in life, so can Jesus.
Amen. Amen. Wonderful words of wisdom by you. And I will end also by saying that something that I echoed at the beginning about our services, because blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. All has to do with what we do as a foundation, the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. And that's what we're all about, those three things: freedom, family, and faith, and helping you to hold on to that. And don't ever let, life circumstances or your own grieving disconnect you from your faith. We're here for you. The church cares. We are the church. And we are here to walk with you side by side accompany you on the journey. So be sure that you make friends with us. I think what sets us apart as Foundation is that we offer that one-to-one personal consultation with a Mercedarian friar. The Mercedarian friars are the ones who founded us, and their charism is that willingness to give their lives for those in danger of losing their faith. If that's you, you're in the right place, right? You're in the right place. So I just want to thank you again, Mickey. Thanks for joining us for this podcast.
Thank you, Anne, for having me.
Everyone, we will see you all next month for the Beatitude series. We'll do the third one, the last Thursday of every month, but our podcasts are on demand. I want to thank our friends with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network for streaming this podcast. God bless everyone and have a blessed Christmas season.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more information about the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, visit nonnatus.org or email director.srnf@gmail.com. Did you enjoy this podcast? Listen to other podcasts from Patchwork Heart Ministry by following Patchwork Heart Radio wherever you listen to podcasts. Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424